how my presentation is going to work today is based off of four main components. The first component, we're going to talk about why we need to talk about shales. What's the significance of shales? The second component is going to talk about my initial investigation or my research about shales. My third component is going to talk about what's my methodology behind discovering and defining what parameters I'm going to evaluate. And fourth is going to talk about my timetable and how I'm going to allocate my budget. So moving forward, the overview of the problem. The average well in the United States today produces only 10 barrels of oil, whereas in Saudi Arabia, it's 10,000 barrels of oil a day. Obviously, a discrepancy of a factor of 1,000. So when you hear politicians and everyone saying that, oh, we need to get off of foreign dependency, that's not necessarily feasible anytime soon. What we need to do is exploit the resources that we have now and increase production from what we have. The average shale play produces about 5%, and certain sweet spots produce up to 10%. Hence the question, what exactly or what parameters or how do we find these sweet spots? If you look at this map that I have right here, you can see that the red areas are areas that illustrate or have shale plays. The United States obviously has a lot of shales. However, if you're producing only 5% of the oil and gas in the reservoir right now, you're not producing a lot. But if you go to the ideal 10%, you're doubling your production. So the initial investigation. The basic research that I have done has eventually led to the conclusion that we're going to look at three essential parameters in order to investigate or how to locate these sweet spots. First, we're going to look at hydrocarbon generation. We all know that there are different types of oil and gases. So we don't want the heavy oils, we want the medium oils because those are more economically feasible. We can sell those at higher prices. So we're going to look at hydrocarbon generation. Second is retention. Just like one of the earlier presentations earlier had said, is that shale plays need hydraulic fracturing. So we want those source rocks, or we want those shales that are easily brittle and that will break easily. So we're going to look at brittleness. And then we're going to look at deliverability, the third criteria. We want low clay content. What clay does is that it makes the rocks more the opposite of brittle. It makes it harder, less likely to break. So we want low clay content, and we also want a low Poisson's ratio. If you look at this illustration that I have right here, it's essentially illustrating Poisson's ratio. That the vertical stress is essentially when it's lengthened an object. So we want an object that actually has a lower Poisson's ratio, essentially saying that it will break easier, so that the hydraulic fracture will perpetrate throughout the shale play. So the methodology. In the beginning, I would like to use Petra and drilling info to essentially locate which wells and which wells I'd like to investigate. Then I'll use various types of logs to identify potential intervals. Then I'll use lab to determine favorable Poisson's ratios. Then determine clay contents in the samples, record my findings, and then determine the significance of the findings. Time scale and budget. Most of the budget's coming down to my salary and Dr. Osasania's salary. And then we have the Petra license. The core samples are going to be donated by the companies that are interested in our investigation. And also the laboratory expenses are going to be covered by the university because there will really be no cost on behalf of the university. Now if you look at my allocation of time, you see that most of my time within the first 5 weeks is essentially researching or investigating. The reason why I'm spending so much time is because I want to make absolutely sure that I'm in the right intervals of production and I have the correct low clay content and such. So as we go further through, it's actually less time. And now you have to ask yourself, why is this research important? Reality is that oil is becoming harder to recover. We want to change the way reservoirs are exploited. If the average production of a shale play currently is 5%, if we can increase it to 10%, we're essentially doubling our production, and that's why it's very important. I would like to use Dr. Osasania because he does have some consulting background in shale plays, and his insight in this area will be very insightful. With that being said, any questions?
So are you looking to maximize recovery rate or overall recovery?
Well, the term shale sweet spots in a shale play is looking at these areas that have like low porosity and like these different, based off of the three parameters that are given, it's looking for a combination of those three elements in which you're going to have increased production, such as low porosity, low clay content. And so ultimately, it's going to look at for that recovery at that certain depth interval. reality is that most of our conventional plays have been depleted, and pretty much what's left over are these unconventional things like coal bed methylene and shale. And some things are just deeper and they're just not economically feasible right now, especially with the price of oil. So once the price of oil increases, then those will become feasible. But right now, we're just producing 10 barrels a day. Fun.
If you have a shell dominated by clay, how can you be able to recover? You abandon the well or you still
No, I mean that's why it's one of the parameters that I'm investigating is that we want to find shales that have low clay content. We're not pursuing those shales that have clay content. That's why I'm going to investigate 5 weeks in the initial investigation, finding those areas, finding those depth intervals in which we can identify, and say, oh, this has low clay content. That way we won't have to go into it and say, and waste money and resources and assets saying, oh, we have to abandon the well. So by having better preparation in the beginning, we don't have to worry about that at the end.
Are you worried about the location of most of these shale formations? Because I know on the map, like some of it's in the Rocky Mountains, Appalachians, like it's going to be national park areas. So oil companies aren't going to have access to those areas.
I mean, that is a reality, but the proposal is that I want to investigate the parameters as to what maximizes and what exactly classifies as a sweet spot. So we can identify that there is a sweet spot and a wildlife reserve that we can get in there. However, we can also use the same classification, the same criteria in, let's say, the Eagle Ford Shale or the Marcellus Shale, and say that will work there as well. And we're able to produce it.
in the course of analyzing this shell, are you going to use laboratory
Yeah.
chemicals?
That's why you can use, for phosphorus ratio, you can use like the LA 608 that we used in Dr. Sam's lab last year for rock problem. So compressional strength and all that stuff. We should know that.
He take reservoir class.